What is sin?
It's a good question.
There's no perfect definition to it.
Sin is a moral, religious decision.
I haven't really explored it for myself.
To be honest with you, I don't know what sin is. I think it's a personal opinion.
I'd say sin is what you feel. You know what I mean? If you feel that you done did wrong, then that's sin, you know?
It's just bad. Sin is bad.
Doing something that you know is wrong.
If you know that it's wrong,
They know that it's wrong.
Sin is when you do something that you know is wrong.
When you do something that's contrary to what you believe.
Do you think that there are some sins that are worse than other sins? Is it all the same?
Yeah, personally I feel some sins are worse more than others.
The quick answer is yes.
My Catholic answer would be yes, there's mortal sins, and yes, so yeah.
Tell me which ones are worse than the others.
I would think that killing somebody would be a worse sin than lying to your parents about something.
Killing someone.
Killing another man.
committing adultery,
Theft, rape.
Blaspheme, that's what I would say. To sit there and say there's not a higher power. That's an ultimate sin.
Killing people is worse. Yeah, it's a lot worse than telling a little white lie, I think.
I don't know. If a sin is a sin, then it's a sin.
Sin is sin no matter way. No matter how you look at it, sin is sin.
You either sin or you don't sin.
Is there any consequences for sin?
I think so, yes.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's called karma. It happens to us every day.
I kind of feel in a karma that what comes around goes around.
Whether it's a little slam the finger in the door or if it's a financial bind or whatever, you know what I mean?
So if you do evil, it might not come back to you right away, but eventually it will.
Is there any consequences for sin?
I think so, yes. I think it affects the afterlife.
In what way? Tell me a little bit about
I
that.
don't think we can know. I don't believe in a heaven or hell, but I think it would be different for everybody.
Consequences. That's not for me to perceive, and that's not for me to judge, really.
Who am I to judge you for your sins, or, for me for mine?
I'm not here to judge who sins and who not sins, you know what I mean?
Do you think you're a sinner?
Sure. I don't think I'm up there in the worst sinners. I feel there's some are worse than others.
I'm a sinner on little things, but not big things.
I guess I am because I'm not perfect.
Do you sin?
I'm sure I have, yeah, so everyone does it every once in a while.
Do you sin?
I do,
How often? Every day? Every week?
every day.
Daily. It's ridiculous, but yeah.
I probably sin multiple times today.
Every day I go to work. Every day I walk out the door.
Are you sinning right now, by any chance?
No.
Is everyone a sinner?
I wouldn't know.
Everybody has some kind of sin.
We always born into sin, so we're all sinners.
Here's what you need to do. You've got to first shave your head. You dress all in black. You've got to wear a white robe, eat only kosher foods. You've got to become a vegetarian. You face Jerusalem. You've got to face India when you pray. You pray only in Hebrew, and you grow a nice big beard. And if you do all of those outward cultural things, you'll discover the God of the universe. And I'm thinking, this is crazy that someone thinks that they can force their culture on God, and that God's going to be impressed by what you wear, what direction you face when you pray, what you eat, and all these sorts of things. It seemed to me that if there was a God out there who could be known, he should be able to be recognized no matter where I face, no matter how I'm dressed, because he's God. Growing up, we always understood that we had our Bible and the Gentiles had their Bible, the New Testament, and that they were two completely separate books. Because the only people I knew who were believers in Jesus were all people in our public school who were Italian Catholic, I imagined that Jesus was Italian. And so the understanding that he's actually Jewish was a shock. And then to hear that the New Testament was written by Jews, I couldn't believe it. My expectation was that the New Testament was like my grandparents had told me. It was a book on how to persecute the Jews, and it's something you should stay away from. Of course, when you're told you should stay away from something, curiosity gets the best of you, and you've got to see it. When I opened the New Testament, I was expecting to find a handbook on how to persecute the Jews. My grandparents had warned me that it was written by people who killed the Jews. That's what I was expecting to see, and yet when I'm opening it, I'm reading a story written by Jews about Jewish people. The New Testament was a fascinating book. And so as I opened this book in the library, I kind of looked around, made sure that none of my friends had seen me taking a Christian Bible off the shelf. And I opened it. Here's the first sentence. It says, "This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham." So 3 people are mentioned, and they're all Jewish. I was very shocked. And as I continued to read, I'm reading the story of a Jewish man who was born in a Jewish village, in a Jewish country, and one day walks into a synagogue and announces that he is the Messiah. The more I read the words of Jesus, the more I became attracted to him. It was as beautiful as anything I had ever read in any other part of the Bible. As I came to faith that Yeshua, that Jesus was the Messiah, it was clear that that was the most Jewish thing I could do. This is not the person who's a renegade to our people. This is the one who was promised in our Bible, the 53rd chapter of Isaiah. It is astonishing. If you would just read that chapter, just without the Bible being around it, you would say, oh, this is some Christian Bible. This is Jesus. When you realize, though, that it's in the middle of our Bible, our Jewish Bible. When I first came to faith, I dared not tell my father, because this is a time period in the 1970s when there were lots of gurus and cults, and he was very concerned about me getting involved in some crazy sect and going off someplace. So I waited for months, and when I finally told him, he was very skeptical. On his own then, he started to read about Jesus as well. About a year and a half later, I told him that the fellow who wrote one of the books that he had read, that this fellow was giving a lecture in the city of New York. And he agreed to come out to hear that person. And one of the most amazing moments of my life was the speaker said, "Would everyone here who is a Jewish believer in Jesus, would you raise your hand?" And I raised my hand. My father also raised his hand. And I looked over and I said, "Pop," he didn't say would all the Jews raise their hand. He said, would all the Jewish believers in Jesus raise their hand? And my father looked over and he said, yes, I heard what he said. The decision to come to faith in Jesus as the Messiah was not something that was a momentary lark. It wasn't something that was a passing fad. And I could see changes in myself that I knew were not from within myself. I had kind of tapped in to a truth for our Jewish people that was very powerful.
The Bible has a lot of different words for sin, generically. Idolatry, transgression, sin, corruption, and so forth. And all of them overlap to some extent, but they have certain kinds of flavor. Sin is probably the most generic one, and has to do with missing the mark, but it's God's mark. So it means that if we break his law, we're sinning, but then the fact that we're breaking the law is transgressing a particular law. And if we're missing the mark by not doing what we ought to be doing, then in some ways we're de-godding God. We're raising something else to be God, and thus we have fallen into idolatry. Sin is the generic category for all kinds of evil. Law breaking is actually transgressing specific commands, doing what he forbids or failing to do what he commands. Idolatry is in some ways the most basic of all of them, because it is decentering God. It's removing him off to the side. Either I become my own God or I choose something else as my God. It's not for nothing that the first commandment in importance, according to the Lord Jesus, is, you shall love God with heart and soul and mind and strength. That's the way we were created. That's the way it's supposed to be. The first responsibility of sentient moral beings is to acknowledge their Creator with adoration and thanksgiving. If instead, then, we fail to love God with heart and soul and mind and strength, we have already fallen into idolatry. We have fallen into sin. We have missed the mark of what we should be, and we have de-godded God. And this most horrific offense is really a kind of declaration of independence from God. But whereas a declaration of independence from a totalitarian evil regime might be a good thing, freedom from God is not a good thing. It's already a mark of horrific rebellion, because God is God. He made us. He holds us to account. He's our creator, but he is also our final judge. He establishes what's right and wrong, what's good and evil by his own character and being. So that so-called freedom from him actually becomes enslavement to sin. And thus it is intrinsically idolatry, because we are raising up some other standard, some other God, some other being to be the very center of all that we choose, everything that we cherish, all that we want the most. That's also why the Apostle Paul can say that covetousness is idolatry. Because if you want something badly enough, that becomes God for you. It's why an atheist can be an idolater. Claiming there is no God becomes a certain kind of ideology in which you have instituted something else, naturalism, your own desires, your own inherited culture or whatever, to be your supreme good. And that becomes God for you. It has displaced the God who is there, to use the language of Francis Schaeffer, and thus becomes a form of idolatry. Sin is an embracing category that touches all of these ways of looking at evil.
We war not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and world rulers of this present darkness. You don't seem to understand something. There is a mean, violent streak to the true Christian life. You don't play games. You don't play church. You don't play Christianity. The only possible attitude toward out-of-control desire is a declaration of all-out war. If you wonder how to make war, go to the manual. Don't just bellyache about your failures. Make war. Nobody goes to hell because of Satan. The only reason we go to hell is sin. There is something about war that sharpens the senses. You hear a twig snap or rustling of the leaves and you are in attack mode. Someone coughs and you are ready to pull the trigger. Even after days of little or no sleep, war keeps us vigilant. It's a violence against all lust in ourselves, all enslaving desires for food, alcohol, pornography, money, the praise of man, approval of others, power, fame, indifference to poverty and indifference to abortion in our souls. This is our enemy. Stop making peace with ears and eyes and hands and feet, tongues. Stop making peace with the members of your body that sin. Kill them. In this warfare, traitors are put to death. Make war! Bang with me, bang, bang, bang with me. No more playing games like it's a stank.
Amen.